Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I am here with Neil Romano and Kathy Martinez, both of whom are two former Assistant Secretaries for Disability Employment Policy of the U.S. Department of Labor. Neil Romano is the current Chairman of the National Council on Disability, and Kathy Martinez is the Vice President for Accessibility at Wells Fargo. Today we will hear a conversation from them about both the progress of the past 30 years and where do we go from here when it comes to Americans with disabilities. Kathy, I will let you take it away. We are so grateful for Wells Fargo's support of this commemoration.
I just have to say on behalf of Wells Fargo that we're totally happy that we're sponsoring this, and Wells Fargo is doing a lot to not only comply with the ADA, but go above the letter of the law and really abide by the spirit of the law, with 11,000 people who identify as having a disability at the bank and 7,300 folks in our Disability Connections ERG. We are really happy to be moving the needle at the bank with regard to accessibility for our customers and our team members, and we absolutely value the talent, passion, and capability and perspective that the disability brings to the company. Neil, as I think we are the only two assistant secretaries so far, I have a question about your experience in the last 30 years as a person with a disability, and tell me how you think the ADA not only has impacted your life, but has impacted our community as a whole.
You know, when I grew up, I had dyslexia before they knew what dyslexia was. So for me, until 30 years ago, it was kind of a, you didn't know if you could, an accommodation was, you didn't know where you'd be, how you worked, what you would do. But since ADA was passed, it became fairly obvious that people with disabilities were beginning to be more and more appreciated in the disability community and in the United States. Frankly, ADA has opened many doors. It's a wonderful piece of legislation, and I was honored to have the pleasure of working on ADA AA when we made a couple of amendments to it. So it's still a great document. We still have a way to go with regard to work and how well we do with work, and I think you and I both agree with that. But all in all, I think if nothing more than just the great spirit it offers and the recognition that people with disabilities are human beings, that in and of itself is incredibly valuable.
You get to ask me a question, Neil.
I get to ask you a question. Kathy, you transitioned beautifully into the private sector at Wells Fargo. What are you seeing in not just Wells Fargo, but other businesses as to how they're beginning to relate to people with disabilities?
Well, I have to say, and thank you for, it's amazing what people believe, but I have to say that the transitioning to the private sector from the disability bubble was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was one of the most, I think it was one of the, it was so worth it. And in the private sector, I see more and more, at least in financial services, but also in other businesses, that people are taking this seriously. And I was very proud to have worked on Section 503 during my tenure as an assistant secretary. And then when I got this job at Wells Fargo, I thought, oh my God, now I have to implement it. The one thing passing it, but implementation is a whole other ballgame. I think that that corporations are doing a few things. A, they're realizing that there's a huge customer base. B, they're realizing that perspective and talent that people with disability bring to their workplace is absolutely essential. C, I think that that companies are starting to change culture around employment. So, you know, we never used to talk about non-evident disabilities. And so I have an evident disability, and as far as I know, you have a non-evident disability. But, you know, now I think companies are having courageous conversations, at least we are. You know, we're telling stories, we're having campaigns, we're supporting the disability community, we're hiring people. At Wells Fargo, we have a community of practice for recruiting, or we have recruiters from the different lines of business that attend to ask questions they may not otherwise feel safe to ask about, you know, proper etiquette or awareness or interview tips. And also, I think that cultures are changing, so more and more people feel safe to come out as a person with a disability if it isn't evident, to ask for an accommodation, which allows them to be more productive. And as we get, you know, more and more numbers in the workforce of people with disabilities, we ultimately change policies, practices, and procedures. And one example is this whole working from home business. For years, the disability community has been kind of chomping at the bit to have that be standard operating practice. And very often companies said no because they were afraid that it wouldn't lead to productivity or collaboration. You know, people would be isolated, they wouldn't work. How do we know you're really working? And now look, you know, one of the silver linings of this pandemic is that we are learning that people can work from home and be productive. Now, it isn't the same, granted. You know, I really miss meeting my homies at work and meeting my team members, but work is getting done. And so I think, you know, for the private sector, there has been a lot of changes. There's a lot more change to be had. I think attitude is still something that we cannot legislate, and we have a long way to go. But you know, we are doing better, and the ADA has made a difference. All right, I want to know, Neil, how the ADA, or you know, what personal benefits have you garnered through the ADA? What about the ADA has helped your life become easier?
Well, that's really an excellent question. Now, especially since I'm a person with multiple disabilities, as you are aware, I have leukemia, so I have a disease that I have to live with every single day, as well as having dyslexia. I think for me, the single most important thing is I'm unafraid to tell people I have those issues. And I'm unafraid to say, look, you know, this means that I might be tired sometimes, or this means that I might not be able to work at the pace, or, well, I don't think right now for me to travel is a good thing for a couple of weeks. Those are the kinds of things that would have been pretty much forbidden in the past. But it also has given me the opportunity to be able to work with one of the groups that I work with, which is Major League Baseball, and with their athletic trainers, and working with the athletic trainers to be able to say, look at a guy like me, look at baseball players who have played with disabilities, and see what their overall value is and project that. And as we talk about things, I remember 30 years ago working in the tobacco field, players would not talk about using tobacco because they didn't, or go get help for it, because they didn't want to get a psychological file on them. Well, now we have full-blown programs for people who have mental health problems in the game. And we talk about it openly and about how important it is. So having had the opportunity both to benefit from being allowed to speak, and then to explain the benefit to a company, to an individual, to a team, to people, has been just remarkable. And I think that, as you said, you can't legislate attitudes, okay? But the fact of the matter is, when people become comfortable with other people who have various disabilities, and someone steps up and says, look, I'm not afraid to say, you know, I have depression. When you say those things, it makes it easier for other people to be able to step forward, and it makes other people understand, okay, he has depression, but he's still a great ball player. He's still a great worker. That's really valuable. This, what I want for the future is I would like to see once and for all, the elimination of 14C, the payment of sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities. I believe that truth is exclusive, and either you have a minimum wage or you don't have a minimum wage.
I'd like to see accessibility woven in as standard operating practice, rather than as something that is a burden for business, because ultimately there's studies that show that that abiding by the ADA and going above the letter of the law and abiding by the spirit of the law is better for everybody.